Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Lockwood here with another episode of our Success in Cardiology interviews. And I am so delighted to have with me today Dr. Fozia Ahmed. She is a consultant cardiologist, subspecializing in heart failure and cardiac devices at Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust, has been there since 2015. And in 2024 was appointed as the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Lead for the National Institute of Health Research in Manchester Biomedical Research Centre. She is committed to addressing barriers and removing obstacles to foster a responsible and inclusive approach to research inclusion, and we are delighted to have her here with us today. Hi.
Hey, thank you very much for the introduction.
So I would like you, please, to tell us really what the barriers seem to be for inclusion of women and minorities in academia, and also what you think we can do about it.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah, for inviting me to talk on this important but also super interesting topic. So I think the barriers don't just relate to research. I guess they can be threaded through somebody's life, and they're the same barriers that they probably face in other areas, but they become magnified when you're, if you like, going down a specific avenue and perhaps seeking or looking at other people doing research, and you think, actually, do you know what, I really like how productive they are, the opportunities they're getting, and then you seek to try and emulate and do the same, and suddenly you realize that the path isn't straight, and you're often sent in a slightly different direction, a few more hurdles in the way. The barriers start, the barriers, the obstacles. I think the first important thing to say is that a lot of the barriers and the obstacles that people from diverse backgrounds, including women, may face when it comes to obstacles to do research are not necessarily, well, I guess the first thing is to say that they're man-made, they're created. Barriers and inequalities are created. They're typically created by people. And it can be either inadvertent or unintentional, but sometimes it's to try and protect your own piece of patch, if you like. Perhaps it's it's a survival skill handed down from the times of when we were cavemen and hunting and everything else. But maybe it's related to that. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too generous. But I think that it's important for us to recognize that these barriers are often created by people, and in the same way, tackling them requires people to have skin in the game in order to remove them. And each of us has got it in us to be able to address our internal biases and remove some of those biases that we have, whether it's that we have historically only ever had academic trainees who look a particular way or have a particular subspecialty interest. It goes to diversity of science, diversity of career stages, who you typically be friends with might be the kind of people that you would engage in research with. So I think it's bigger and broader than identifying specific barriers, because there are so many opportunities to create them.
So what sort of barriers are created on purpose? Some of them are kind of inadvertently
Okay.
created or subconsciously created, but what about barriers created on purpose?
So I think the ones that are created on purpose, it tends to be, networks. So including or providing opportunities to people that are only from within your own network, who are at a specific career stage and have already achieved something. Sometimes that means that talented people don't get the opportunity to develop and follow a particular path because they've not met that level yet. But perhaps one of the reasons why they've not reached that level or achieved the same thing that somebody else has of a similar career stage is because they've not yet had the opportunity to be included in papers, to be included in conference abstracts. So you could start with authorship.
So do you think that these people could find more of such opportunities so that they then are
Yeah,
in a position to join in?
yeah. Each one of us has got what we call a Johari window. So you've got this kind of very narrow view of the world, and you just look outside that window and you might see what you've always seen. But if you pull the shutters back a little bit further, you suddenly realize that there are a whole group of people who are equally as talented and, if provided with the same opportunity, would thrive. Whether that means looking at someone who isn't in your direct line of sight, or who hasn't been put forward to you or sponsored by another individual who you like and respect. It requires us all to look outside of our own groups and networks to see the people who aren't sitting in those groups and networks, who otherwise, they look talented on. Um, it does require you to go outside of your comfort zone. But yeah, it starts by perhaps sponsoring or uh, taking on someone who you wouldn't normally take on.
So you think the responsibility lies mostly then with the people higher up who are already involved, not looking in the right places for more diverse groups to do their research, rather than the diverse people not putting themselves forward as much as they should
I
for
think
such
it's
opportunities?
I think it's multifaceted. If we start by tackling that first question, first point, I do think that it's incumbent upon us as people who have reached a specific career stage, and I'm not saying that at any particular level at all, I'm probably down here, but as you progress up the ladder and you're a little bit further off the ground than others, it's incumbent upon us to create opportunities for other people coming through. It's incumbent upon us to perhaps select, if I think about women in particular, when they're looking for PhDs and MDs, they often might be in the middle of their, they might be at a time in their life when they're looking to get married and start a family. And sometimes for people who've got a fixed idea of research outputs that they want to see from an MD or a PhD student, they may immediately think and look at somebody and think, oh, actually, I'm going to look for somebody else who's not going to get pregnant during their MD or PhD. I've done it differently. I've actively sought out women who are wanting to combine research with family life, because I realise how life experiences, lived experiences, actually enrich the research offering. And I quite enjoy supporting women do what I tried to do 13 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
when I was supported.
You were. Were you supported primarily by women who'd gone before, or did you find men who were supportive of your need to join in?
I was very fortunate. So I'd gone looking for PhDs and MDs for a while, couldn't find anything. They were all taken up by colleagues in the region. And I was, by that point now, I was 8 months pregnant, still looking for an MD, but came with my own funding. And very kindly, Mamas took me on as an MD supervisor, and I had the most positive experience I could have asked for. I had a baby in the middle of my MD, had maternity leave, albeit curtailed, probably an American style maternity leave. Um, and having limited time meant that you had to be really focused and really precious with what time you did do when committing to research. So actually, I was more productive than I've ever been at any other time point in my life, because I knew that I had deadlines that I had to work to. I knew that I had blocks of research that I could do. So yeah, I think when you give opportunities to people who have historically been overlooked or ignored, or we wait till they've had the baby and come out the other end, then they can surprise you.
Yeah, and it's often the people who come into the sphere are more motivated than those where it just kind of fell into place for them.
100%. And if you think about it, if you think about women who are, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and looking to have a family as well, the fact that they're wanting to do research, as well as combine it with all these other things, and it must tell you how much they value or want to prioritize it or see it as important. Because it would be easy to not. It would be easier to not do it.
Yes, well, it would be easier not to do it. But having said that, I don't know if you agree, but to me, it seems like a period, if you can get an actual period taken out to do research rather than just trying to do it along with your clinical work, then that becomes a period where you're less likely to be called into a cath lab when we're talking about cardiologists, and actually quite a good time to be pregnant and to have children. Um,
Wholeheartedly agree. This is exactly why I wanted to do research around the time that I was having a family.
So it fits for both ways. It's like a win-win. You're motivated. You really can't be in the cath lab. You want to do research. This is a great time to really go for it. Um, but then once women and minorities are back in clinical practice, can they still achieve things academically?
Let me pull that apart a little bit. I want to go back to your where you started about, and I guess pulling an earlier comment that you made. One of the things that I think I've not mentioned is that doing research creates opportunities, and often this is the kind of stuff that isn't discussed in a clinical sphere in a professional capacity, but the kind of discussions that you have with your friends, with your network, with people more informally about the hidden advantages, or perhaps the not so hidden advantages of doing research in your career. It creates career opportunities going forward, which, and it's a non-fungible asset or a non-fungible currency when you're doing research at the time. But a couple of years down the line, it's the differentiator between you and somebody else getting a job. It's the differentiator on your CV with the publications and with the conference presentations. It's the differentiator that means that you're a slightly better writer than you would have been had you never done the research. So I think it enriches the offering at the end of the day when you're applying for consultant jobs or when you're applying for opportunities with other organisations external to the NHS, which you wouldn't have had you never got the opportunity to research. So I think it's really important to highlight the benefits of doing research, and why we need to remove some of the barriers to make sure that everyone, all talented individuals, have the opportunity to do research.
Right, so that gets people into doing research at an early stage, but a lot of
Yeah,
these people do a PhD even, which is, definitely kind of a declaration that you are serious about academic.
yeah,
And yet further down the line, there are fewer and fewer women involved in academic cardiology. And so that must have more to do with what happens once they're,
yeah.
perhaps bringing up a family and doing clinical practice. And what can they do, for example, to get more actual protected time to be able to continue to do research? Because these people want to do research,
Yeah.
but they're finding barriers to doing it.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. You look around and you see lots of people doing research. But what the difference is between, if I think about myself and other colleagues, is that they've historically, not now, because I've learned that actually I need to stop being so polite and accommodating and just start asking for the same things, is that they've often got protected research time in their job plan. And the job plans are a bit like a secret diary, aren't they? That they're not disclosed. But it's only often through word of mouth that you find out that people have got protected research time in their job plan, perhaps without being as research active as you. And that's what people from, I think, if you want to do research, you do need protected time in your job plan. And what's good for one should also be good enough for another. Um, so I do think that, if I'm thinking, maybe not blue sky thinking, but I don't think it's radical or controversial to say that women and people from minority ethnic backgrounds who want to do research should have the same access to resource and opportunities as the male cardiologist across the whole.
Right.
Um,
So if they're not, again, I think it comes down to, is it because somebody is actively not giving them this time, or is it because they are failing to ask for protective time in the way that their
I
white
think
male
it could be a
colleagues might do?
mix. It could be a mix of both.
Mhm.
But either way, what they need to know is to start asking. If you don't ask, then there's no one. Then someone could easily turn it back on you and say, "Well, you never asked," and they did ask.
Right.
So I think you need to remove that um, obstacle, if you like, or remove that objection to why you may not have had research time before. So definitely at the outset, perhaps soon after starting your post, once you're in position, once you've secured the job at the right time, maybe even in a job interview or a job application, in a recruitment process, it would be good to explore what are the opportunities in this position to undertake research as part of my day-to-day activities.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Yeah, and the way you put that was actually also very non-aggressive, if you like. You weren't demanding research time, you're just exploring. I think that word is a really good thing to bring in there. Just like to explore what the opportunities are. So that's something
Yeah,
people can actually use. Yeah.
and that's it, isn't it? People expect us to be, and I'm not trying to play into stereotypes here, but you know, um, we're often framed as being polite, accommodating, and so I guess we're just playing the game to get what we want in a way. Um, it's a They're the kind of conversations that you need to have early on. There's no point waiting like I did till you're 9 years into the job and saying, please, sir, can I have a research PA? When actually it was on the table and I've just not asked for it. Perhaps, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think often there is a thing that we don't like to ask quite the same way as others do. And partly that comes, I think, from a lesser expectation of what we are owed, if you like.
Yeah.
Perhaps we're not owed, but neither are those other people who did get it owed it,
Yeah.
and they asked for it and got it. So asking and asking again is I think really important here. And when you go to ask, for example, for some protected time, or even just, could I please be included on this major research project that's going on in my institution? Um, one of the things that they can take to the table is this knowledge that you're more likely to be able to include more patients in your research of ethnic minorities or female gender if you have the same people on the research team. So do you know anything more about that? Do you have any experience of that in either you or some of the people that you've mentored?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to say, if I start with your first point, you mentioned the word table, and it suddenly set off a light bulb in my head. I think linking what we've just been talking about to what we're talking about now, it's really important for people to be at the table when discussions about research are happening. Because if you're not at the table, then as the proverb goes, you can't be on the menu, and then you don't have a chance to be included moving forward. That it's well documented, and I can't tell you what the source evidence is, but it's been said on many occasions that more diverse, inclusive research teams are better at recruiting more diverse, inclusive, or having more diverse, inclusive recruitment strategies, and that in turn leads to better diversity in participant recruitments. But I think one of the problems is that for the longest time, research institutions, funders of research, researchers ourselves, we've had a relatively narrow view of what diversity looks like, and we've been focused solely on diversity of participants in clinical trials. So more females, more people from minority ethnic backgrounds, more diversity of age, ensuring that we recruit older patients as well, and we're not excluding patients. But that oversimplifies the problem a little bit, and you're only ever looking at one direction when it's two sides of an equation, aren't they? You need to have, we've overlooked and ignored diversity, inclusion, inclusive research methods in research teams and in the research groups. And that should not be the afterthought. You can't go after the prize without putting some investment in the team up front. So you need both sides to be balanced. There needs to be diverse, inclusive research teams with inclusive research methodology in the middle of it, if you want to go after the diverse, inclusive participants in research that are representative of the populations who we treat. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate for that, and that's one of the core focuses of my role at Manchester NIH RBRC, which is in ensuring that we put emphasis on equality, diversity, inclusion within the workforce and within the student population.
Yeah, excellent and very important work. So,
and and there's a lot of focus now on diversity in clinical trials, whether it's commercial trials, non-commercial trials. They realize how important it is. We can't omit 50% of the population from clinical trials if we want to have broad indications for licensing and for it to be representative of the people who will go on to receive the drugs or the therapies.
right. So one of the other things you said that you're perhaps able to offer some insight into is alternative routes into research. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, okay. So alternative routes to research, I guess there's two ways to think about that. One route is um, at a later career stage. So once you're already practicing as a cardiologist, many people didn't have the opportunity to do research at an earlier career stage, but still it would have been something on their wish list that they would have want to do. Or they see it as enriching the offering for the practice. Because we've still got, once you're appointed as a cardiologist, you've still got another 30 years ahead of you. So having the opportunity to include research at that stage is huge. So for me, my alternative route to research was at an earlier career stage. So I was still a registrar, so still a trainee, if you like, pre-consultant stage. And I didn't get a regular funded PhD. It wasn't a ready-made gift-wrapped package, so I had to go out, think up my own research idea, proposal, then write it up, and then apply to funding institutions independently. And then once I had funding, then I went to seek a supervisor. So you don't need to follow the traditional route that's been set for you. If that's not available to you, then go out and, in the words of Barbara Cassidy, go and blaze your own trail in the wilderness and find your own path. Because yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, and of course, if you do it that way, you end up researching something that you might personally be passionate about, which is going to be so much easier then to be productive with it because you're really interested.
100%, and that's what I did. I chose heart failure. I looked at my own area of heart failure and devices, and it's something that I've continued 15 years after I did or 13 years after I did my MD. So if you choose your own research, you're more likely to be able to go deep into it and to pursue it long after you've finished your MD or your PhD. Other people who don't get the opportunity or choose not to do an MD or a PhD, there are masters available. There are opportunities to do post CCT research and fellowships. So there's so many opportunities out there, but often it's not the kind of stuff that's socialized or familiarized with you in clinical training, that you almost need to be either looking in those directions or affiliated with people who are fluent in the language of grants um, and research.
So what if you are, let's say, a single mother
Yeah.
and you're in the cardiology training stages and you really want to do research, but you realize that extending the period of time where you're going to have a lesser salary as you do as for until you become a consultant, whatever you're doing, they tend to pay you less for it. So they feel an obligation to get their consultant job to be stable and with a decent salary as early as possible. How can they still get into high quality research if they really haven't done much until they're consultant level?
There are people who are doing research who've never done an MD or a PhD. It is a little harder because you've not had the 2 or 3 years of research, dedicated research time or training to be able to hone or develop your skills, but it's still not impossible. Um, I think if you wanted to do there are two options. You either do a formal route post CCT, so post qualification, and perhaps you have a couple of research PAs that you'd need to figure out how you would get funded for them, or whether you could use your supported professional activity time to do some of this. But then that could take several years to get an MD if you're doing it part time. The other route is just to start getting involved in clinical trials that are occurring at your hospital. Nominate yourself to be a principal investigator and cut your teeth that way. There are several schemes that are designed for clinicians or people who are in a clinical sphere that aren't research active. I don't know if the associate PI scheme extends to consultants, but the NIHR has an associate PI scheme, which is for, we often have trainees who are going down this route, and it's about an alternative route to learning research methodology and practical skills that allows you in time to become a principal investigator in your own right. And that comes with some support. Doesn't come with funding, but at least there's a slightly structured support system there. So there are things that are being developed. People, funders are starting to realize that not everyone's followed the traditional route into research. And if you think about the funnel, you if you've lost people here or you miss people here, you need to have some way of capturing them later on.
Right.
So I think people are starting, or funders are starting to wise up to that and are creating opportunities for people who've had none.
Right. And so I think there are funders doing that. I mean, the British Heart Foundation are about to open up something for mid-career people, although I don't know if they will then select people who did also early career stuff
Yeah,
to go
yeah,
on. Hopefully they'll give some new people a group, but also the professional societies, I think, are getting
yeah,
involved in this. I know the American College of Cardiology has a training program helping people to get involved in research and learn research technology, and I think a number of the other major societies are following suit, whether it's up and running already or going to be.
yeah. There needs to be more than one entry point into research, and it needs to be not just at pre-consultant level. There needs to be opportunities, like you said. Um, I guess if you think about women in cardiology, were a relatively recent addition in the last few decades, for the most part, and the opportunities to do research needs to reflect the facts that we are going to need time to raise our families and to have children, and also, if you don't want to do that, just to be able to have a life as well as have a job. So having multiple points of entry is definitely desirable.
Right. And that, of course, applies to men as well, for whatever
Yes.
reason they
Yeah,
may
yeah, sorry.
have not done it early on. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think, and that's something that needs to be called out, because actually, it is really easy to overlook the fact that it isn't just women who face barriers to inclusion in research. If you're from a minority ethnic background and if you're a man of certain demographic, then you may not have ever had any opportunity to date if you're in the wrong place. Institutions matter, and if you're in the right institution, you can soar. Sometimes, often it's not the person, it's the place.
Yes. And of course, who you know, which you
Yeah,
mentioned really at the beginning. And again, I would say professional societies are the way to go if you want to meet people and
yeah,
go to the sessions about things you're interested in, and make yourself known. Don't just go there and sit quietly in the corner. Stand up and ask a question is often a really good way to get people to notice you, especially if you ask a good question and you ask it
yeah,
confidently. That can be important too. So let me just ask you one last question. If you had in front of you an early career cardiologist who was, let's say, they're female and of an ethnic minority background, um, what would be your main piece of advice to them for moving forward? And they have an interest in academia.
yeah. I think it's important that you things are framed in a positive way. I think sometimes you've been told to this point that, or you've not had the opportunity. If they're coming to me, then often they've not had the opportunities that, or they've tried other places before me. And I think it's just important to reinstill and build up their confidence and highlight to them that they are the talent, they are the asset, and it's our job to nurture them. And I think it's not about creating opportunities or giving things to people who don't deserve it. It's about recognizing that talented people, when provided with equality of opportunity, can achieve exactly the same thing as their peers of similar expertise and qualifications, um, which perhaps they've not been told before. So
Right.
I think it's important to recognize that sometimes it's a case of building up people's confidence because
Right.
they've never had anything positive said to them before.
Right. So, and that, of course, results in inner beliefs that may be holding them down, inner
Yeah,
barriers. So we've talked a little bit about external barriers, but there are sometimes inner barriers, and that people don't believe that they are sufficiently skilled or sufficiently qualified. And the chances are they're as skilled and qualified as somebody else who is going to go for this
yeah,
opportunity. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that if you're a cardiology trainee, you are the cream. I'd say this through rose-tinted spectacles because I am, we're all interested in cardiology, but in our eyes, you're the cream of the crop. You've already been so successful.
Right.
You wouldn't be in cardiology if you weren't good.
That's very true. And if you are not in cardiology yet, but you're trying to be, then it still applies though, doesn't it? To realize that you have your qualities, that you're probably just as good as someone else. And one of the things that I think stops women and minorities from even going into cardiology is that same belief that it's not possible. Personally, I was told, and of course this was a lot of years ago, and I hope these things aren't being said so much anymore. But I was just told, oh, there's no chance for a female to succeed in cardiology, and it's simply not true. Um, Firstly, I did because I am the sort of person who, when I'm told I can't do something, thinks, just watch me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think again, I think there are still people out there who are being told, you won't make it because of something stupid like you're a woman or you're an ethnic minority, and know that now there are actually a lot of people who have made it and proven that it is possible. And you really just have to kind of block your ears to these negative comments by people living in the past.
100%. And I think the difference between now and a few years ago is that people won't necessarily say it to your face. They won't
Mm.
say the reason why they don't want you in their group. You just won't get the opportunity. So it doesn't. And I think if you're not getting a response, it's really important that you look in other directions. Don't just assume that because one person said no to you, or because this isn't possible, or there's no space for you. So it's often given as the excuse that there's no space, there's no capacity, there's so many people. Look in a different direction. You're probably looking in the wrong place.
Right. Lovely. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wonderful insights, and for being willing to do this interview for us. Very grateful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.